In a powerful live broadcast from the White House, Vice President JD Vance revealed shocking details about the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. With the nation still grieving, he spoke about the suspect, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, and what this tragedy means for political violence and free speech in 2025. Only 5 days earlier, on September 10th, Charlie was shot and killed while speaking to students in Utah. Millions of viewers tuned in, desperate for answers, as Vance sat at the same desk where Charlie once spoke. A banner read, "Special Memorial Broadcast, The Charlie Kirk Show, Live from the White House." Visibly emotional, Vance began, "America, this isn't just another show. This is a tribute to my friend and brother in the fight for truth." His hands shook as he set aside his notes. "Tonight, you'll hear the truth." Behind him was a glowing photo of Charlie with his wife, Erica. Vance's voice cracked as he recounted flying to Utah the day after the shooting. He stood with Charlie's family and personally carried his friend's remains to Arizona. Erica had hugged him, her hands trembling, and said, "He loved you so much, JD." Vance replied, "No, he loved you more. You made him the happiest man alive." Fighting back tears, Vance shared how Charlie was a loving husband and proud father whose children will now grow up without him because of political hatred. The studio was silent, with even veteran producers quietly wiping away tears. "I realized the best way to honor Charlie," Vance said, "is not just through words, but by being the best husband and father I can be. That's how we truly win. That's how we fight this darkness," Vance said, his words bringing the audience to tears. Then his tone shifted. He straightened his shoulders, his voice growing firm. "But America," he continued, "there are truths you need to hear tonight. Hard truths." His eyes locked on the camera, speaking directly to millions watching at home. "I've heard calls for unity these past few days. Unity with people who mocked my friend's death, who posted memes celebrating it, who harassed his grieving family the very next morning." His voice thundered, shaking with anger. "There is no unity with evil." The studio gasped. Then came the revelation that stunned everyone. Surveys show 1 in 4 young liberals believes political violence is justified. 26%. He slammed his hand on the desk. "Do you know what that means? Tyler Robinson isn't an isolated case. He's the rotten fruit of a poisoned tree." The room went silent as a chill swept through the audience. Vance's voice grew intense. "Charlie's blood cries out tonight. And before this broadcast ends, you will hear the truth about his killer. The truth the media doesn't want you to know." The screen cut to a video clip from Arizona. Erica Kirk, Charlie's widow, stood beside his casket, her voice breaking but steady. "Charlie never once raised his voice at me. Not once. He loved our children more than anything." Back in the White House, Vance paused the video, his eyes glistening. "That," he said softly, "is the voice of a woman robbed of her future. Of children robbed of a father." His voice hardened with anger. And while she held her babies, people online laughed. They called Charlie names. They cheered his death. Gasps echoed through the studio. Vance leaned forward, pounding the desk softly. "Do you see what we're facing? This isn't politics anymore. This is cruelty. Pure hatred unleashed." His voice dropped to a whisper. "When Erica hugged me in Utah, she said, 'I don't know how to tell the kids their daddy is gone.' The silence was so deep you could hear the air conditioning hum. America wept with her." Vance's tone grew heavier as he relived the painful memory. "On September 11th, I flew to Utah. I walked into that hospital room and saw Charlie's lifeless body. I touched his hand. It was cold." He paused, fighting back tears. "I helped lift his casket into Air Force 2. My wife, Usha, held Erica's hand the entire way. And all I could think was, how do you explain to 3 small children that hatred stole their father?" Vance looked straight into the camera, speaking not as the vice president, but as a father. "Last night, I kissed my kids goodnight. Charlie can't." That's when it hit me. The best way to honor him is to love my wife and children the way he loved his. Family is the true battlefield of our time. He raised his hand toward the audience. But make no mistake, this wasn't random. Tyler Robinson didn't just wake up one day and decide to kill Charlie. He was shaped by a culture that glorifies violence, fed poison by powerful institutions that profit from division. The air grew tense as everyone sensed a darker truth was coming. Vance's tone hardened. His voice became calm but forceful, each word deliberate. "America," he said. Tyler Robinson pulled the trigger, but he didn't act alone in spirit. Behind him are powerful networks whispering, "It's okay, celebrate it. Excuse it." You've seen their articles, their smears, funded by billionaires, protected by media giants. They lied about Charlie while he lived, and now they lie about him in death to justify why he's gone. Gasps rippled through the room as Vance declared, "This isn't just about one killer. It's about the machine that raised him, shaped him, and cheered him on." In the corner, Tucker Carlson leaned back in stunned silence. Vance gripped the desk tighter. "If we don't confront this, Charlie won't be the last. And I refuse to stand here as vice president and lie to you about that. Tonight, you will hear the truth." The studio went still as the lights dimmed slightly. Vance leaned closer to the microphone, his voice low and heavy. "Many of you are asking why a 22-year-old man named Tyler Robinson walked into Utah Valley University on September 10th and took the life of someone who never harmed him." The silence was suffocating. As viewers leaned in, "I've met with federal investigators," Vance continued. "There are classified details I can't share, but what I can tell you is this. Tyler Robinson wasn't just a lone wolf. He was the product of a system, an environment where hate is planted, nurtured, and rewarded." He scanned the room filled with reporters, grieving supporters, and staff. "And already we've uncovered disturbing associations," Vance continued, his voice steady but sharp. "Robinson was consuming media that glorified violence. He followed accounts that mocked political assassinations and lived inside a digital bubble that told him people like Charlie Kirk didn't deserve to live." Gasps rippled through the studio. Vance's eyes narrowed. "Understand this, Tyler didn't create that poison. Someone poured it into him. And tonight, I'm going to show you who did." The audience shivered. Across the country, viewers braced for what was coming. For the first time, Vance turned to his guest. Tucker Carlson leaned forward, visibly shaken. "Mr. Vice President," Tucker began, his voice tight, "I've covered stories for decades. I've seen lies and smear campaigns, but never this. Never this level of open celebration of death. Within minutes of Charlie's murder, I saw verified accounts mocking him, calling it justice." He paused, his voice breaking. "This isn't journalism. This is bloodlust disguised as opinion. And Tyler Robinson drank it like water." Vance nodded grimly. "You're right, Tucker. And it's not just individuals doing this. It's entire networks, institutions funded by people who profit from tearing America apart." The camera zoomed in on his face, his jaw tight with anger. "That's why we can't pretend this was random violence," he said, his tone unflinching. "This was the harvest of a corrupt system. And if we don't confront that system, then tomorrow's Charlie could be anyone. Me, you, even your children," the audience murmured uneasily. Tucker's eyes fell, then rose again. "So the real question is, who's behind it? Who benefits from this chaos?" Vance exhaled deeply. "That's exactly what I intend to answer tonight." The tension in the room was unbearable. Vance straightened, his voice growing louder and more forceful. "Let me be clear," he said, slamming his hand softly on the desk. "Right now, there are people calling for unity. They want us to hold hands with those who laughed while Erica Kirk wept. They want us to forgive those who harassed Charlie's family the very next morning." He leaned forward, eyes blazing. "There is no unity with people who celebrate murder." The room erupted, some gasping, others nodding silently in agreement. "There is no unity," he continued, his voice like a blade, "with those who lie about Charlie to justify his assassination. There is no unity with radicals who terrorize families while hiding behind the excuse of free speech." The studio froze. His words cut through the air like thunder. If America truly wants unity, Vance declared, we must first demand the truth. And tonight, I will drag that truth into the light, no matter how much it terrifies the elites who profit from silence. The crowd was stunned. Across the nation, viewers held their breath. The camera then cut to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., seated quietly beside Vance, ready to speak as the next bombshell loomed. RFK Jr.'s voice was almost a whisper. I've lost family to violence. I know what it does to the soul, he said, his words trembling. When I saw Erica Kirk holding her children, I was taken back to my own childhood, to the moment my father was taken from me. The room fell completely silent. Even veteran producers were seen quietly wiping their eyes. RFK Jr. leaned forward, his hands shaking. Charlie was a joyful warrior. He believed in faith, family, and truth. To see his name dragged through the mud while his body was still warm, it's evil. Evil, wearing a suit, writing polished articles, hiding behind screens. Vance placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Bobby, you've carried this pain for decades. You understand better than anyone. Political violence doesn't end with one man. It ripples through families, through generations. RFK Jr.'s eyes glistened as he nodded. And tonight, America must hear the truth about what planted the seed in Tyler Robinson's mind. Because only truth can stop this cycle from repeating. The audience broke into quiet, emotional applause. The moment was raw and deeply human. Vance cleared his throat, regaining composure as his voice returned to a commanding tone. Let me share what investigators uncovered in the past 48 hours, he said. Tyler Robinson wasn't just a troubled young man. He left behind a digital trail, and what we found is chilling. He held up a stack of printed screenshots as the camera zoomed in. On private forums, Robinson posted things like, "One bullet can change history." He joined groups that twisted Charlie's speeches into lies, where he was encouraged, mocked, and fed a constant diet of hate. Vance's voice grew heavier, and hours before the assassination he wrote this. Tonight he speaks, but tomorrow the voice of hate is silenced. Gasps rippled through the studio. Vance dropped the papers on the desk with a sharp thud. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't random madness. This was intent. Carefully shaped by a world where violence is cheered and death is celebrated, he said, his tone hardening. And the people who egged him on share the blame. Every laugh at Charlie's expense, every excuse for violence, every post justifying hate, they all put another bullet in the gun. His face grew stern, his grief now forged into steel. Some people think words don't matter, that tweets and posts are harmless. But tonight I say this, words can kill, and they killed my friend. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Charlie Kirk believed in free speech, Vance continued, but not speech that calls for blood. There is a line, and it was crossed. He stared into the camera, as though looking into the living rooms of millions of grieving Americans. Tyler Robinson will stand trial, he said. But the bigger trial is for our culture, for the people and groups who think violence is just another form of politics. The audience leaned forward, hanging on every word. America, Vance said firmly. We cannot heal by pretending both sides are the same. We cannot lie to ourselves and call this random. It's not. The statistics, stories, the smears, they all point in one direction, Vance said, his voice rising with intensity. And unless we face this truth, unless we confront it head on, there will be another Charlie, another father, another friend, his voice thundered. Not on my watch. Not while I live and breathe in this office. The crowd erupted, applause mingling with tears. The tension thickened as Vance turned to his right. Stephen Miller, his longtime advisor, leaned into the microphone, his face like stone and his voice cutting. Ladies and gentlemen, what we are witnessing is not random, Miller said sharply. Tyler Robinson didn't act alone, not in his mind. He was shaped, molded, and fueled by institutions that thrive on division. He tapped his pen on the desk for emphasis. This isn't about one angry young man. This is about networks funded by powerful donors. people who pay writers, influencers, and so-called activists to poison our culture. They demonize conservatives, smear their families, and cheer when blood is spilled. Gasps rippled through the room. Do you know what message that sends to someone unstable like Robinson? Miller's voice rose. It tells him, you'll be a hero if you pull the trigger. That's not politics. That's terrorism, Vance nodded firmly. Stephen is right. We have to stop pretending this was some isolated act. It's organized encouragement, a system that rewards hate. The words struck like a hammer. Families watching at home held one another tightly, tears streaming as they began to see Charlie's death not as random, but as part of something far more sinister. Tucker Carlson, who had been silent, finally leaned forward. His voice was calm but chilling. JD, he began. When I look at Tyler Robinson, I don't just see a shooter. I see an entire generation left behind. Young men drowning in lies, told they're righteous if they hate. He paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. But what's worse, Tucker continued, is that these lies don't just come from the dark corners of the internet. They come from institutions that shape our culture, media outlets, universities, powerful foundations. He turned his gaze toward the camera, his eyes burning. If we don't call this out, we are complicit. And if the government doesn't act, the next funeral won't just be for an activist. It could be a congressman, a senator, or even the president himself. The audience stirred uneasily, a murmur of fear rippling through the room. Vance cut in, his voice steady and resolute. That's exactly why we're here tonight, to draw a line. Charlie's blood must not be spilled in vain. The mix of grief and fear electrified the air. Viewers at home could feel it through their screens. This was bigger than one man's death. It was the beginning of a reckoning. The tension in the studio grew even heavier as JD Vance turned to his right. Stephen Miller, his longtime advisor, leaned into the microphone, his face hard and unflinching. Ladies and gentlemen, Miller began, his voice sharp. What we're seeing here is not random. Tyler Robinson didn't act alone, not in his mind. He was shaped, molded, and fed by institutions that thrive on division. He tapped his pen on the desk, each click echoing through the silent room. This isn't about one angry young man. This is about networks funded by powerful donors who pay writers, influencers, and so-called activists to poison our culture. They demonize conservatives, smear their families, and celebrate when blood is spilled. The audience gasped, some covering their mouths in shock. Do you understand what message that sends to someone unstable like Robinson? Miller's voice rose. It tells him, you'll be a hero if you pull the trigger. That's not politics. That's terrorism. Vance nodded firmly, his face set with resolve. Stephen is right. We must stop pretending this was an isolated act. This is organized encouragement, a system built to breed hate and violence. Families watching at home clutched each other tightly, tears streaming down their faces. For the first time, the darkness behind Charlie's murder felt deliberate. Not just a tragic accident. Tucker Carlson, who had been sitting silently, leaned forward at last. His voice was calm but carried a deep, chilling weight. JD, he said, when I look at Tyler Robinson, I don't just see a shooter. I see an entire generation abandoned. Young men drowning in lies, convinced they're righteous if they hate. He paused, letting the silence stretch. But what's worse, Tucker continued, is that these lies don't just come from the shadows of the internet. They come from our institutions, media outlets, universities, foundations, the very places that shape our culture. His eyes burned as he looked into the camera. If we don't call this out, we are complicit. And if the government doesn't act, the next funeral won't just be for an activist. It could be a congressman, a senator, or even the president himself. A murmur of unease rippled through the audience. Vance stepped in, his tone steady but urgent. That's exactly why we're here tonight, to draw a line. Charlie's blood must not be spilled in vain. The air crackled with emotion, grief and fear blending into a charged electric energy. Viewers at home could feel the weight of what was unfolding. This was no longer about one man's death. Something far bigger was being exposed. Leaning forward, the studio lights reflecting off his notes, Vance's voice dropped to a grave tone. "There's one detail the public doesn't yet know," he said slowly. When investigators searched Tyler Robinson's phone, found just hours after the attack, they discovered a series of payments. Small amounts wired from anonymous accounts. He paused, letting the suspense build before delivering the blow. "But those payments," he continued, his voice hardening, "were traced back to organizations that, on the surface, claimed to fight disinformation," Vance revealed, his words sending shockwaves through the audience. Gasps erupted across the room as he continued. "These very groups," he said, his voice cutting through the silence, "received millions of dollars from foundations linked to powerful liberal donors, and yet they funneled those resources into the very communities where Tyler Robinson was radicalized." The camera panned to the stunned crowd. One woman covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Vance's tone grew sharper. "I don't believe every person involved wanted violence," he said, pausing to let his words sink in. "But I do believe they didn't care if it happened. And when you don't care, when you turn away, you become part of the problem." The words hit like a thunderclap. The broadcast no longer felt like a memorial tribute. It had become something bigger, a moment of history unfolding live. Taking a shaky breath, Vance held up a folded piece of paper. His hands trembled. "Before tonight's broadcast," he began softly, "I sat with Charlie's mother. She gave me this note and asked me to share one line with the nation." He carefully unfolded the paper, his eyes wet with grief. She wrote, "My son was not perfect, but he loved his country enough to die for it. Tell them, JD, not to forget him." The studio fell completely silent. Quiet sobs broke the stillness as a few audience members wept openly. Vance looked straight into the camera, his voice breaking. "This is what political violence steals," he said. "It doesn't just silence a voice, it shatters families. A mother who will never see her son walk through the door again. Children who will never feel their father tuck them in at night." He clenched the paper tightly in his fist. "And I promise you this, if we let Charlie's death fade into just another news cycle, then we are all guilty of forgetting." The audience rose to its feet, applauding through tears. It wasn't just politics anymore. It was a nation grieving. When the applause subsided, Tucker Carlson leaned in, his tone calm but weighted. "JD," he said, "what strikes me most isn't just what happened to Charlie. It's what it means for every American family. If a man like him, a husband, a father, someone surrounded by security, can be murdered in broad daylight, what does that say about the safety of ordinary citizens?" The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. Vance nodded slowly, his face grave. "It means we're all vulnerable," he said. "Every pastor who speaks the truth, every mother who dares to post her beliefs online, every college student brave enough to speak up in class. They all feel the same fear. If you speak, you might pay the price." He paused, his voice rising with conviction. "But America cannot be a country where violence decides who gets to speak. If we allow that, freedom dies. And when freedom dies, we all become prisoners of fear." The audience erupted, some shouting, "Amen." In that moment, the broadcast no longer felt like a political program. It felt like a national awakening. "This is evil," Vance repeated, his voice rising with fury. He slammed his hand on the desk, the sharp crack echoing through the studio. The audience jumped, startled. "And I will tell you this," he said, leaning forward, eyes blazing with controlled rage. "We are standing at a crossroads. Either we stop this now, or it will consume us all." The room fell into a tense, breathless silence. "Tyler Robinson didn't just stumble into violence," Vance continued, his tone cutting like a blade. "He was groomed. Step by step, post by post, fed lies that turned him from a confused young man into a killer. And those lies didn't come from the shadows. They were pushed by powerful institutions that profit from hatred." He held up a series of printed screenshots for the cameras. The images were pixelated, horrifying, messages encouraging violence, memes celebrating death, private chat threads where Robinson was hailed as a future hero. These, Vance said, shaking the papers for emphasis, are not just random comments. They are weapons. Weapons aimed at our culture, our families, our very way of life. The studio gasped collectively, some audibly crying out. "This is why Charlie Kirk is dead," Vance thundered. Because somewhere, someone decided that political violence was not just acceptable, it was commendable. And Tyler Robinson was their instrument. The audience sat frozen, hanging on every word. Even Tucker Carlson, usually composed, looked visibly shaken. Vance's voice dropped lower, almost a growl. "Let me be clear. If we allow this to continue, there will be another Charlie, another funeral, another child asking why their daddy isn't coming home." He paused, breathing heavily, then pointed toward the camera, speaking directly to millions of Americans watching at home. To the people who sent those messages, who funded those platforms, who knew this could happen and looked the other way, your hands are not clean. You may not have pulled the trigger, but you loaded the gun. The words struck like a lightning bolt. Gasps filled the studio. A woman in the front row clutched her chest, whispering, "Dear God." Vance's expression hardened into resolve. "America, we cannot meet this evil with silence," he declared. "We must confront it. We must name it. Because if telling the truth now comes with a death sentence, then none of us are free." The studio audience erupted in applause, some standing, some weeping openly. It wasn't just support, it was a collective roar of defiance. As the noise swelled, JD Vance placed a hand over his heart and whispered into the microphone, almost to himself but loud enough for the nation to hear. "For Charlie. For his family. For every voice they tried to silence. We fight." The lights dimmed slightly, the camera panning over tear-streaked faces. This was no longer a broadcast. It had become a battle cry. Charlie didn't deserve to live, that silencing him would be a righteous act. Vance's voice grew colder, steadier. And when you repeat a lie enough times, when you glorify hate and mock the dead, someone eventually decides to act on it. Tyler Robinson was that someone. But make no mistake, he wasn't alone. The camera zoomed in, catching the fire in his eyes. Every click, every donation, every smug article that called Charlie a villain helped load the gun that killed him. His fist slammed on the desk, the echo reverberating through the studio. And tonight, America needs to know exactly who is responsible. Gasps rippled through the audience. A woman in the front row clutched her hands together and whispered a prayer. Vance held up another document, shaking with anger. Investigators have traced donations, millions of dollars, from elite foundations and activist networks directly to organizations that Tyler followed online. They claim to fight misinformation, but what they really do is spread propaganda, demonize anyone who disagrees with them, and radicalize vulnerable young men. The audience buzzed with outrage. Tucker Carlson leaned forward, his voice low but sharp. "So, you're saying these so-called watchdog groups aren't just bystanders. They're fueling the very extremism they claim to oppose." "Exactly," Vance said, nodding. "And they hide behind noble-sounding names while doing it. But let me tell you something, America. If you fund hate, you are guilty of the hate crimes that follow. You can't wash your hands of the blood." The room went dead silent. Even the camera crew seemed frozen in place. Stephen Miller's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "This is not just corruption. It's a machine. A system designed to reward cruelty and punish truth-tellers. Charlie was targeted because he told the truth. And the people who built that machine are counting on us to be too afraid to name them." He pointed straight at the camera, his finger trembling with rage. "Well, we are not afraid." The crowd roared in agreement, some standing, others weeping openly. Vance's voice rose above the noise, thundering with resolve. Tyler Robinson was the trigger. But the architects of this violence are hiding in boardrooms, universities, and media empires. And tonight, I am telling you, they will be exposed. He held up Charlie's photo, his hand shaking but his gaze unwavering. Charlie Kirk's life mattered. His death will not be erased, mocked, or forgotten. And to those who think they can bury the truth along with his body, Vance leaned so close to the microphone his next words were a growl. You picked the wrong nation to silence. The studio erupted, cheers, sobs, and chants merging into one overwhelming wave of emotion. Across America, millions felt the weight of his vow. This was no longer just about Charlie Kirk. It was about a reckoning long overdue. Just a headline or a tragic story on the news, it was deeply personal. JD Vance's voice trembled but grew stronger with each word. Charlie wasn't just a leader. He was a husband, a father, a friend. His kids will grow up with an empty seat at the dinner table because of hatred that was allowed to fester unchecked. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the silent room. 2 nights ago, he continued softly, I watched as Erica, with tears streaming down her face, placed her hand on Charlie's casket and whispered words only he and God could hear. And at that moment I made a silent vow. I will not let this country forget him. I will not let his death become another statistic. And I will not allow the forces that fueled his murder to hide in the shadows. The audience erupted into applause, their grief now mixed with determination. Some people shouted, "We will remember," while others simply wept in silence. Vance raised his hand to calm the crowd. His voice, now a steady thunder, cut through the noise. Let me be clear, there is no unity with people who cheered Charlie's death. There is no unity with those who harassed Erica and her children while they were still mourning. And there is no unity with those who dance on graves and call it justice. The room shook with cries of "Amen!" And, that's right, Vance leaned closer to the microphone, his tone fierce. Unity without truth is a fraud. Healing without honesty is a lie. If America truly wants to heal, we must climb the mountain of truth, no matter how painful it is to face. We must name the poison. We must expose the machine that teaches young men like Tyler Robinson to see murder as noble. The crowd fell silent, hanging on his every word. He lowered his voice almost to a whisper. I will not betray Charlie's memory by pretending this was random. And I will not look into the eyes of Erica or her children and tell them their husband and father died for nothing. The audience exploded into standing applause, tears streaming down their faces. It didn't feel like a broadcast anymore. It felt like a promise, a binding covenant between a grieving nation and its leader. JD Vance placed his hand over his heart, his face etched with sorrow. When we landed in Arizona, as Charlie's flag-draped casket descended from Air Force 2, I prayed for strength, for Erica, for their children, and for this country. Because if we don't confront this hatred now, it won't stop with Charlie. It will claim more fathers, more mothers, more sons and daughters. His voice broke as he finished. We owe it to Charlie to fight back, not with hate, but with truth. Not with vengeance, but with justice. Because if we fail, he scanned the crowd, his eyes blazing, then Charlie's murder will not be the last. And I refuse to let that happen on my watch. The room erupted, not just in applause, but in a collective cry for action. It was no longer just grief, it was resolve. Strength that night without even being here. His life was stolen, but his mission lives on. In Erica, in their children, and in every single person willing to speak truth no matter the cost. Vance gripped the edge of the desk, his voice now fiery. Charlie's killers thought they could silence him, but they only amplified his message. Evil may pull a trigger, but truth multiplies. And tonight, that truth will be heard. The audience erupted in applause, some standing, others wiping away tears. He held up a folder thick with evidence, his tone unrelenting. These documents connect Tyler Robinson to a web of organizations funded by some of the most powerful progressive donors in this country. Tyler didn't just wake up one day filled with hate. He was encouraged, validated, and funded by a system designed to divide Americans and destroy voices like Charlie's. Gasps filled the room. Tucker Carlson's face was pale, his jaw tight. Stephen Miller muttered under his breath, "Unbelievable." Vance flipped a page and slammed it on the desk. "One transfer of funds," he said sharply. came from an organization tied to a foundation that regularly bankrolls media outlets, the same outlets that mocked Charlie as his family grieved. The audience roared in outrage. Some shouted, "Shame!" Others simply shook their heads in disbelief. Vance leaned closer to the mic, his tone fierce and resolute. This was never just about one young man with a gun. This is a machine, greased with money, fueled by lies, and built to silence truth-tellers like Charlie. If we ignore this, if we pretend it's just another tragedy, then more families will sit at kitchen tables with empty chairs. More children will grow up without their parents. The studio went silent, the gravity of his words sinking in. He exhaled slowly, his voice softening as he recalled his final moments with Erica and the children. When I looked into Erica's eyes, I didn't see hate. I didn't even see anger. I saw heartbreak, but also courage. She told me, "Jay, if Charlie's voice has been silenced, then others must speak louder." Vance's own voice cracked. Her children clung to her legs as we prayed together. They didn't fully understand what had happened, but they knew one thing: Daddy wasn't coming home. He paused, scanning the room, his eyes wet with tears. That night I realized something. Evil wanted Charlie's voice silenced, but evil made a fatal mistake. Because truth doesn't die with a bullet. Truth multiplies. The audience shot to their feet, clapping and shouting through tears. Vance raised his hand high, his voice rising above the chaos. Charlie gave me strength that night. And I promise you this, his mission will not end with his death. It will grow louder, stronger, and unstoppable. America will not be silenced. The studio erupted, the sound echoing like a war cry across the nation. Charlie's courage didn't just inspire me, it gave strength to America. And I promise you tonight that courage will live on through all of us. Vance placed his hand firmly on the thick folder of evidence. His tone grew heavy, serious. There's one final truth America needs to hear. This money trail doesn't stop with fringe online groups. It leads to powerful foundations, organizations funded by taxpayer dollars that helped create the very environment that celebrated Charlie's death. The audience gasped. Tucker Carlson covered his mouth in shock. RFK Jr. lowered his head. Vance continued, his voice filled with fury and grief. "I've spoken to investigators. I've seen the transfers, the digital fingerprints, the coordination. This wasn't just one man pulling a trigger. It was a machine. A machine that preys on young men, poisons their minds with hate, and convinces them that murder is justice." He paused, his voice trembling. "I will not stand by while these forces profit from bloodshed. And I will never let Charlie's death fade into a forgotten headline. America must choose tonight. Will we allow evil to win, or will we rise and fight for truth?" The studio erupted in a deafening standing ovation, echoing like thunder. JD Vance stood tall, his hands shaking but his voice unwavering. Charlie Kirk died because he told the truth, but his death will not be in vain. We owe it to Erica, to their children, and to every grieving family to unite, not in fake unity built on lies, but in real unity rooted in truth. He pointed directly into the camera. If you loved Charlie, if you believe in freedom, don't just sit back. Speak up, get involved, shine light into the darkest corners where lies grow. Put on the full armor of God and fight, not with violence, but with courage, with honesty, and with unshakable faith. The crowd roared, tears streaming down their faces, clapping so hard the cameras shook. Vance's voice softened as he recalled his friend's words. Charlie once told me, "The truth will outlive us all. Tonight, let's prove him right." He turned to the audience one final time. If Charlie's story touched your heart, if it moved you to tears or gave you hope, please like this video, subscribe, and share in the comments how Charlie inspired you. Your words will help carry his mission forward. And if you want to go deeper, join our membership. Stand with us to keep Charlie's fight for truth alive. He lifted his hand as the crowd fell silent. Together, let's honor Charlie. Together, let's make sure his light never goes out.